About a month ago, we found out some secrets about our town. I need to leave now, so when you read this, I won't be around anymore. I have to go hide because of what I'm going to do. But I believe that all of you will understand. Now, let me tell you what happened. Growing up in a small town is not fun because it gets really boring. I'm sure many of you who lived in a small town can remember times when you were so bored and desperately wanted something to do. We explored every part of the woods near our homes, hoping something exciting would happen. My grandma used to say, "Hours are meant to be used, not counted." She would kick me and my cousin, Billy, out of the house, telling us to go find something to do. We played with the other kids who had to take care of themselves after school and sometimes got into trouble. I can't remember exactly what we did, but I know we did something to pass the time. I've always had a bad memory. What I do remember well is the Davis Hills. These were 3 hills that led south to another town. They might have seemed like boring dirt mounds to most people, but to us, they were like a makeshift roller coaster. My grandma often took the Davis Hills route because she thought the grocery store in the nearby city had cheaper eggs. Billy and I would beg her to take us with her so we could enjoy the ride. We'd sit in the front seat of my grandma's old Ford Ranger and laugh with joy as she put the car in neutral, and we sped down the hills. I can still feel the excitement in my stomach as we zoomed from one hill to the next. Another fun part of our ride was the disappearing house. At the top of the first hill, we'd spot a tiny red brick home. But as we reached the second hill, it seemed to vanish, only to magically reappear at the third hill before slowly disappearing again as we left town. The house wasn't anything special. Even as a kid, I could tell it was older than my grandparents' old shack. Someone must have lived there because the lawn was always neat, and 2 rows of Indian hawthorn shrubs made a path to the front door. But my grandma didn't know who lived there or if anyone owned it. I found this odd because my Nana knew everyone in our small village and was like a local celebrity. "Best stay away from there," she'd warn. "If I don't know them, they're a stranger." Do you boys hear me? Still, Billy and I were fascinated by the house, and our friends often talked about exploring the yard to find out who lived there. But we never did, and soon, the house faded from our memories. After high school, I left town and went to school far up north. I settled down in Brooklyn and got used to being a small part of a big city. I visited my hometown twice. The first time was when my grandfather passed away after I finished college. The second time was last month when Nana passed away. It was a community event, and lots of people helped Billy and me with the arrangements. Billy had left town and was doing well in the lumber industry 3 towns over. We were different but still close, like brothers. Most latchkey kids with parents gone usually don't stand a chance, but we kept going. Everyone from the village came to the funeral. After the last few people left Nana's house, a couple of our childhood friends stayed for some late-night fun. Billy made a fire in the backyard pit, and I tapped a keg of Miller. To Nana, our friend Sean Norris said, "The people's grandma." "Here, here," we all shouted together. "It's good to see y'all," Hank Wilson said. "What's it been? 10 years since we saw you both?" I nodded, looking at the other men who stayed. They looked more tired and worn out than Billy and me, worn down by years of not much changing. I felt a bit guilty. It feels good to be back. I honestly miss this place. Billy gave me a confused look but quickly hid it. Me and Sam appreciated the kind words at the service, Pastor Milton. Freddie Milton laughed and rolled his eyes. "You can call me Freddie outside of the pulpit." I spoke up. Who would have thought old Freddie Milton would be the pastor at Mount Sinai? Same Freddie Milton who could shotgun a beer in 3 seconds. Ha! I could say the same for y'all. Big City Sam working for the mayor. He turned to Billy, and I still can't believe Billy Burns is driving that fancy Cadillac parked out front. I thought he'd be driving the short bus. Sean yelled jokingly. We all laughed and looked at our beers for a bit. Then Hank spoke up. Hey, do y'all remember riding down the Davis Hills in your Nana's truck? Sure do, Billy said with a smile. That was the most fun when I was a little kid. It was like our own amusement park, Freddie added. Your Nana really drove that old truck fast down those hills. Do you still go down them? Sean asked. Nah, not really. There's no need now. I tried taking my kids there, but they were too busy with their phones to enjoy it, Hank said. Kids these days have it easy. I can't remember how many times we got in trouble just to have some fun. Remember that spooky house on the hills? How it would disappear every time we went down. Oh yeah, Freddie said. I can't believe I forgot about that house. Who even lived there? Don't know, Billy shrugged. Nana didn't know them, so they must have been trouble. We talked about checking out that place. I remember all the stories we made up about who lived there. I thought we did check it out. Sean exclaimed. I don't think so. We always said we would, but I think we chicken out. No, I swear we went there. Billy, you and Sam were definitely there. All of us were. Hank, Freddie, and what was that kid's name? Kevin, Kyle, Kenny. Yeah, Kenny Doyle. What are you talking about, Sean? Who's Kenny Doyle? Kenny. You have to remember him. He had a lazy eye and spiked up hair. A real oddball guy. Oh yeah, now I remember. Freddie said. His dad was the janitor at the church. Strange family. Didn't he move before we started middle school? I don't know. Hold on. Guys, I have no idea who you're talking about. We never went into that house. I swear we did. The door was unlocked, and we went into the living room. There was an old TV, an antique chair, a record player, and a weirdly small door. Like only a kid could go in it. Sean stopped talking with a concerned look on his face. Well? What happened after that? Billy spoke up, his face turning white. I remember now. A lady lived there and offered us some cookies, and, oh God. Are y'all messing with me? Billy, what are you talking about? Hey! Where are you going? Billy threw his beer down and dashed to his Cadillac. We chased after him, trying to get him to stop because he was too drunk to drive. I hopped in Hank's truck and sped after him. The only light we saw was from his red tail lights. I knew where he was going. We reached the first hill, and as we zoomed down it, I felt a wave of happiness followed by a strong feeling of worry. Memories flooded my head, and as we leapt out of the truck and raced after Billy into the now abandoned, disappearing house, I suddenly realized. We had been here before. It was the summer before middle school. Kenny Doyle was an outcast among the other kids. He was jittery, got angry easily, and would throw uncontrollable tantrums in grade school. Every time we saw him, he was in the principal's office. Usually, we avoided him, but that summer, Billy and I were in the same vacation Bible school group with Kenny. The disappearing house came up as a topic, and Kenny was adamant about checking it out. We should ding-dong ditch it, he yelled while clasping his hands together. Billy and I were always up for some fun and gathered the usual suspects. We sneaked out on our bikes and met the other boys about an hour after sunset, laughing as we zoomed down the first hill. Kenny went up the walkway and banged on the door while ringing the bell. As we zoomed back to our bikes, the front door flew open so forcefully that I tripped and fell from being so startled. A tall woman, maybe in her mid to late 30s, appeared in the doorway. She had her dark brown hair in a bun and wore a red checkered apron. She shook her head and grinned, showing a mouth of shining white teeth. "Boys causing trouble," she said in a firm yet soothing voice. "Okay, come on in." It's about to rain, and I'm baking cookies. I looked at Billy, who shrugged, and then we stepped inside. The rest of us followed into darkness. My name is Miss Hattie, by the way. Hank swerved into the front yard, where Billy was on the ground, rocking back and forth like a madman. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, and his face pale. Sam, he sputtered in almost a whisper, I remember everything. Billy leaped to his feet and sprinted toward the front door. It should have been me, he screamed. Billy, wait! Sean cried out as Billy thrust his shoulder to try and open the boarded-up front door. I went after him, but with one more push, Billy breached the door and fell headfirst into the house. As he did, I felt a wave of nausea and collapsed as more memories piled in. Kenny, what did we do to you? Take a bite of these. They're not as good as your Nana's, but they'll do the job. You know our Nana? Why, of course I do, Billy Burns. Everyone in this whole town knows your Nana. Well, she doesn't know you. Oh, she's just being coy, Sam. Your Nana and I go way back. She and her friends used to play around my house all the time when they were your age. Huh? You don't look that old. Well, the Lord has been good to me. What can I say? Well, I guess we should be going. Thank you for the cookies. They were awfully good. Oh, no. I can't let y'all bike back in this rain and track mud all over your Nana's house. She'd have a hissy fit. Say, would you boys like to meet my very special friend? I remember trying to get Billy and the other guys to leave, but strangely found myself sitting next to them Indian style on the plush shag carpet. Miss Hattie stood in front of the tiny living room door and looked at us one by one. She smiled broadly, but I noticed no warmth behind her saucer-like blue eyes. Okay, boys. Behind this door is my special friend. She'll choose a lucky winner who will receive a wonderful prize. Does anyone want to go first? I do, Hank replied. Well, excellent. Let's see if young Henry is the winner. Henry, crawl on over and knock on my friend's door. Hank shuffled to the tiny door and carefully knocked. Miss Hattie bent down and put her ear to the door, listening patiently while the rest of us looked at each other with confusion. Nope. Oh well, better luck next time. Hank shrugged and sat back down next to us. I'll go next. Excellent, Freddie. I'm sure my friend will want to meet the preacher's son. Freddie knocked on the door, but nothing happened again. Oh darn! Miss Hattie exclaimed. I guess my friend is a little shy today. Mr. Norris. Why don't you go next, young man? Sean knocked on the door, but it stayed shut. Oh no! What's up with her today? Miss Hattie put her hands on her hips and then smiled at me. Samuel Burns. I think it's your turn. I walked over to the door and softly knocked, but, like the others, nothing happened. She has to pick one of you. Billy? Billy hunched over, crossing his left-hand fingers behind his back, and closed his eyes. He knocked on the door and listened with his ear against it. His eyes grew wide, and he turned to look at me. But before he could say anything, the door rattled, and we heard 3 loud knocks from the other side. The room got colder, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up in excitement. Well, would you look at that? Miss Hattie happily shouted. Billy is our winner. Yay, Billy! Go ahead and open the door to meet my FR dash. Wait a minute. Kenny yelled. I didn't get to go. Miss Hattie stopped talking and slowly turned her head to face Kenny. Her happy grin had turned into a sour frown. Excuse me, she said with thinly veiled contempt. I said, Kenny began with his hands on his hips, I didn't have a turn. My special friend only picks one winner, Mr. Doyle. But I didn't get to go. That's not fair." "Well, sweetie, sometimes life isn't fair." "No! I get a turn. This always happens to me. Everyone always does this to me when I didn't do nothing wrong. Why won't you give me a turn, lady? I don't even want the prize. I just want a goddamn turn." Miss Hattie stood unfazed during Kenny's rant, then smiled at the upset boy with balled-up fists and tears in his eyes. "Oh, Mr. Doyle. What have they done to you?" she said, but her voice sounded darker and echoed through the house. "Come now," she said, extending her hand to Kenny. She led Kenny to the door, patted the back of his head while he happily knocked on it. There was a brief moment of silence before the door softly shook, and the sound of a lock being turned ripped through the house. Miss Hattie began to giggle and opened the door. We looked inside but only saw darkness. "Go inside, Kenny. It's rude to keep my friend waiting." Kenny smiled, got down on his knees, and disappeared. Miss Hattie closed the door behind him, and it locked. The next thing we heard was screaming. Sean ran to the door and tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The screaming continued, becoming loud shrieks while the rest of us begged Miss Hattie to let him out. Miss Hattie stood impassively, ignoring our pleas until Kenny went silent. Miss Hattie's eyes rolled back into her head as if she became possessed, and a voice thundered from her mouth, "Leave this place." We scrambled out of the front door and shakily hopped on our bikes, pedaling up the hills, not even noticing that the events of that night seemed to vanish from our minds as the house disappeared behind the hills. I remember waking up with a headache, and my grandma kept asking if we hung out with Kenny Doyle because he didn't come home. The whole town started searching. I volunteered with the guys to look for him in the forest, not realizing Kenny was less than a mile away. How could I forget? "Billy! Come on, man, where are you? We can't be in here!" Sean yelled at Billy. Hank fumbled in the back seat of his truck, then turned on a jacklight, lighting up the living room. Even with all the dirt, the room looked the same as when we last saw it. Billy sat on the ground before the small door, muttering softly to himself. "Billy," I said softly, "I remember everything too, okay? We have to go." Billy shook his head. "You don't remember everything. You don't know." "Don't know what?" "That I was chosen. I was supposed to go through that door. I remember, I finally do. But Kenny took your place instead. You got lucky that." "No! You don't understand. You what?" I heard a voice from the other side of the door. It sounded like my mom's. "Your mom's? What?" It didn't make sense. Billy's mother, my Aunt Julie, had been dead for over 5 years when we first visited the house. I don't know, man, I swear it was her. She was calling for help. She seemed to be in trouble. "I have to see." "Have to see what?" But before I got an answer, Billy rushed to the small door and banged on it. Chaos broke out as the rest of us tried to grab him, dragging him out of the house. Just as we were about to reach the front doorway, we heard it. 3 knocks. We fled back to Nana's house, trying to make sense of what happened all those years ago. After some talk and more alcohol, we decided to move on with our lives. Who would believe us anyway? I flew back to New York and settled into my usual routine until I got a call from Billy's wife, Melissa. He was missing. They found him the night before I planned to return to help with the search, though I already knew where he was. I felt numb as an investigator asked me why Billy would have gone into that abandoned house and entered its crawl space, even though it could only fit a small child. I helped Melissa with the funeral, and the other guys avoided me at the service. Melissa couldn't understand why Billy did what he did, noting that he had been acting strangely leading up to his death. We still haven't really been able to grieve. I have to take care of a few things first. And now I'm here, standing outside this old shack, with a bottle of Lone Star filled with gasoline and an old rag. I light a match and hurry back to my rental car, taking the hills back to Nana's and watching in the rearview mirror as the house disappears, hopefully for good. But as I drive down the last of the Davis Hills, the memories remain.